I received the divorce papers by email while I was still in the desert. 14 years of marriage summed up in a PDF attachment. My name is Ethan, 43 years old, a ranked sergeant in the 101st Airborne Division. I had been in Helmand for 5 months when Sarah decided she wouldn't wait any longer. The subject line said, "Let's be adults about this." The body of the message had 4 short sentences. She had already filed the paperwork. She had already emptied our joint account. She had already moved in with her new boyfriend, Kyle, into our house in Boise. I read the email twice, closed the laptop, took a shower in the communal stalls, put on my uniform for my shift, and said nothing to anyone. When I got back to my bed that night, I replied with one word. Understood. That was it. No arguments, no pleading, no threats. Miller, my roommate, noticed something was wrong. "You all right, man?" he asked, without looking up from his book. "Yeah," I replied. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, and that was the end of it. Soldiers know when to leave things alone. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. 7 months before my deployment, things had started to change. Small things. Sarah stopped asking about my day, started working late at the medical office where she was a receptionist, started going to the gym 4 times a week, but never seemed to sweat. New clothes, new friends I'd never met, new passwords on her phone. I didn't confront her, didn't start checking her messages or following her around. That's not my nature, but I wasn't blind either. So I made a few quiet moves of my own. Nothing dramatic, just precautions. I stored important documents in a unit across town. Birth certificate, marriage license, house deed, which was in my name thanks to the VA loan, military benefits, paperwork. I moved my grandfather's old watch and my mother's silverware to the same place. Things that mattered. I also opened a separate account at a different bank and began transferring part of my paycheck there. Not enough for her to notice, but enough so I wouldn't be starting from zero if things fell apart. The night before I left, she hugged me at the airport and said, "Stay safe, okay?" Her eyes were dry, like she was saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband heading to war. I should have seen it then, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What she didn't know was that I had prepared for this moment, and what she never understood is that I don't start fights, but I do finish them. I met Sarah at a friend's barbecue in 2011. I was home between deployments, staying with my buddy Kevin in Boise. She was finishing nursing school, but ended up working the admin desk at a clinic. "Less stress," she said. We got married 9 months later. Sarah used to say she was proud of my service, even though she never really understood it. Her dad was a bank manager, her brother a pharmacist. No military background in her family. She used to ask when I'd get a real job, not realizing that after 16 years, the Army wasn't just a gig. It was my career. It was my calling. We bought our house in 2015. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. 4 bedrooms, small yard, quiet neighborhood. My name was the only one on the mortgage since the VA loan was in my name, but I added her to the deed because that's what married people do. They share things. My father died a year after we got married, heart attack while shoveling snow. My mom passed 3 years later, lung cancer, even though she never smoked a day in her life. They left me a little money, not a fortune, but enough to pay off Sarah's student loans and still have a safety net. I deployed 5 times during our marriage, Iraq twice, Afghanistan 3 times. Every time I came home, Sarah seemed a little more distant, a little more restless, like she was playing a role she had already outgrown. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she told me once, after I mentioned the possibility of renewing my contract for another 4 years. "I'm tired of being alone all the time." I understood. I truly did. But the Army was the only place where I genuinely felt I belonged. I was good at my job. People depended on me. In 2020, things began to shift. Small things at first. Sarah would get annoyed when I called during her girls' nights. She started talking about how her friend Melissa had divorced her husband and was now living her best life. She began making comments about how we didn't really have anything in common anymore. I suggested couples therapy. She said we were fine, just going through a phase. Then came the late nights at work, the weekends away with friends I'd never met, the new clothes, the gym membership she barely used. I should have confronted her, but that's not how I handle things. It never was. My father taught me to think before I speak, to be sure before I act. Either way, she agreed to a settlement. Full restitution of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any claim to the house or my military pension, and a signed confession regarding the forgery. In exchange, I didn't press charges. The divorce was finalized 7 months after that email from Helmand. No fault, clean break, all things considered. The day the last papers were signed, I got a call from Agent Davies. Kyle Bennett was sentenced today. 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Peterson got 12. Thought you'd want to know. "Thank you," I said. "There's one more thing," she added. "We found evidence they pulled this on 12 other military families. Your case helped us establish the pattern. Those families might recover their money because of you." After I hung up, I sat on the porch of my rented apartment, watching the sun set. thinking about those other families, other men who went to war, thinking their homes and marriages were safe, only to come back to ruins. I hadn't planned on being the one to take down Kyle and Peterson's operation. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes things happen in unexpected ways. My phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. I never wanted it to end like this. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A year later, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many memories, too much betrayal in those walls. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 3 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, a creek running behind it, no neighbors for miles. I retired early from the Army. 21 years was enough. I'd given all I had to give. I got a dog, a German Shepherd named Scout. Started doing carpentry work for locals. Nothing fancy, but it kept my hands busy and paid the bills. My military pension covered the rest. Sometimes I thought about Sarah. Wondered where she'd ended up. David had heard she moved back to her hometown in Oregon, working in another medical office, starting over. I don't think I hated her anymore. I didn't feel much at all, to be honest. She made her choices. I made mine. One night, I got a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was in the Navy, deployed, when Kyle and Peterson tried to pull the same scheme on her. The FBI had given her my name as part of the case. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but you saved our home. Thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away." I read it twice, then pinned it to my fridge. Some days, when the silence got too loud or the memories too sharp, I looked at that letter and remembered something good had come out of all this. Last I heard, Kyle was still in prison. Peterson too. The system had worked, for once. As for me, I was finding my way forward, one quiet day at a time, building something new, something that couldn't be stolen, forged, or betrayed, something that was mine, and mine alone. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, David called. "The FBI wants to meet. They've been investigating Bennett and Peterson for months. You're not the first, but you might be the case that finally brings them down." For the first time since receiving that divorce email, I felt something close to satisfaction, not because my marriage was over, but because the truth was finally coming to light. I met with the FBI agents at their Boise field office, Agent Davies and Agent Miller. They recorded my statement, made copies of every document David and I had gathered. "Your case helps establish a pattern," Agent Davies explained. "It shows intent, organization, which makes this a conspiracy rather than isolated incidents." "And what about Sarah?" I asked. "My wife, ex-wife?" The agents exchanged glances. "We're still determining her level of involvement," Miller said carefully. "Did she ever mention financial difficulties, pressure to sell the house?" I thought for a moment. "She used to say we were house poor, that we should downsize. I never saw the need. Our mortgage payments were manageable on my salary." Davies made a note. "When did that start? About 7 months ago, around the time she probably met Kyle and did the refinance?" Miller asked. "She never discussed it with me. She forged my signature while I was deployed." They asked more questions, took more notes. When we finished, Davies handed me his card. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, do not confront your wife or Bennett. We need to build this case carefully." I nodded. "Understood." That night, I drove back to our neighborhood, parked a block down, across from our house. Kyle's truck was back, must have been released from impound. Sarah's car wasn't there. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "We need to talk in person. Meet me tomorrow at Riverside Park. Please bring the money." I showed the message to David over breakfast the next morning. "Don't go," he said. "Nothing good can come from meeting with her now." "I won't," I replied. "But I want to know what she's doing today while she thinks I'll be meeting her." We drove to our house at 9:45 a.m. and parked across the street. At exactly 10 o'clock, Sarah came out, got in her car, and drove off, headed toward Riverside Park. "What now?" David asked. "Now we wait," I said. 25 minutes later, a car pulled up with a real estate company logo on the door. Samuel Peterson. Kyle came out to greet him. They talked at the door, then both went inside. "Should we follow them?" David asked. I shook my head. "No need. I installed security cameras last year, indoor and outdoor. They back up everything to the cloud." David smiled. "You didn't mention that before." "It never came up," I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the security app and angled the screen so David could see. Peterson and Kyle were in our living room. Peterson was taking photos. Kyle was pointing out features of the house. I turned up the volume. "Should go live by the end of the week," Peterson was saying. "Already have a cash buyer lined up." "How much?" Kyle asked. $435. We're listing at $485. They offered $435. Everybody wins. And the husband? Sarah says he's stirring things up. Peterson waved it off. "Military guys are all the same. Make noise, but they've got deployments, responsibilities. He'll settle just to get rid of it." I looked at David. "Are you recording this?" He was already filming the live feed on his phone. Every word. I forwarded the feed access to Agent Davies with a short message. "Happening now." 35 minutes later, our house was surrounded by FBI vehicles. I watched from down the block as agents cuffed Peterson and Kyle. My phone rang. "We got them on tape discussing the fraud scheme," said Agent Davies. "We're charging them with conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempted sale of property under false pretenses. We'll need a formal statement from you, of course. And Mr. Briggs, your wife just arrived on scene. She's distraught." I looked down the street. Sarah was standing on our lawn, hands over her mouth, watching as FBI agents carried boxes of documents out of our house. "What happens to her?" I asked. "That depends," Davies said, "on what she knew and on what you want." I watched Sarah for a long moment. 14 years of marriage. Good years in the beginning, before whatever this had become. "I just want what's right," I said. Finally. The federal case moved quickly. Kyle and Peterson both took plea deals, implicating each other and several other co-conspirators in what turned out to be a four-state operation targeting military families. Sarah maintained that she didn't know anything about the larger scheme, claimed Kyle had convinced her I was hiding money, planning to leave her with nothing, said the refinance was his idea. She just went along with it. Maybe that was true, maybe not. I need to report this immediately." "I understand," I said. "I've already filed a police report." That night, Sarah texted me. "Who have you been talking to at the bank?" Kyle said someone was asking questions. I didn't reply. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office, filed documents contesting the refinance due to fraud, filed a formal notice that no changes to the property could be made without my presence. 2 days later, Sarah called. I let it go to voicemail. "Ethan, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults." Like adults? The same words from her email. I still didn't respond. That afternoon, David called. "They froze the refinance funds. And there's more. Your wife's boyfriend has been driving your truck, right? The one under your name?" "Yes. He was pulled over this morning driving with a suspended license. Those DUI convictions. The truck was impounded." "Good," I said. "He also had some interesting items in the vehicle. Prescription pads from the clinic where Sarah works. They weren't blank." I closed my eyes. "She's been stealing prescription pads?" "Looks like it. The police are investigating." I hung up and sat on the edge of my motel bed. This was getting bigger than I expected. Part of me wanted to call Sarah, warn her, but then I remembered the security footage, my house, my dog, my life being handed over like it meant nothing. This was the path now, and honestly, I didn't want to turn back. I met with the bank fraud investigator the next morning. His name was Thompson, a short man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. "This happens more often than you think," he said, spreading documents across the table. "One spouse is deployed to the front, the other sees an opportunity." "What happens now?" I asked. "We froze the fraudulent refinance funds, but there's a problem. Some of the money is already gone." "How much?" "About half. $16,000, I leaned forward. "Where did it go?" Thompson hesitated. "I can't disclose that information. It's my house, my forged name, my stolen money." He slowly nodded, then turned the computer screen toward me. "These are the transfers from the refinance account." I examined the list. Multiple transfers to someone named Samuel Peterson. Not Kyle, someone I had never heard of. "Who is Samuel Peterson?" I asked. Thompson shrugged. "Not my department, but you should have your lawyer subpoena those records." I called David as soon as I left the bank. "Samuel Peterson," he repeated. "Let me check." An hour later, he called me back. "Found him. Samuel Peterson is a real estate agent, specializes in fast closings, cash deals." "She was planning to sell our house," I said, the realization hitting like a punch to the gut. "Seems that way. The deposits were likely a signal to get the listing started, but here's where it gets interesting. Peterson has done deals with Kyle Bennett before." "Kyle Bennett? That's my wife's boyfriend?" "Yeah. They've closed 4 deals together in the last 3 years." I sat on a park bench trying to process everything. So it wasn't just Sarah trading me for another guy. What was this? A planned operation? David said cautiously. I looked into Kyle Bennett. He has a pattern. Gets involved with women going through divorces or whose spouses are deployed. I found 4 cases so far. In each one, the woman's home was sold well below market value to one of Peterson's clients. Bennett takes a cut, then moves on. And Sarah? Did she know? Hard to say. Maybe she's a victim too. Or maybe she's in on it. I rubbed my face. This wasn't just about Sarah cheating anymore. It was bigger, calculated, and other military families had been victims. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, David said. This crosses state lines, involves the military and VA loans. They're interested. That night, I sat in my motel room with a beer, thinking about everything. wondering if Sarah had been lying to me our entire marriage, or if she got pulled into Kyle's scheme, wondering if it even mattered. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. Ethan, please call me. The bank said something about fraud and Kyle got arrested driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Who is Samuel Peterson?" 3 dots appeared as she started typing, then stopped, started again, then stopped for good. I don't know what you're talking about. $16,000, I typed. Multiple transfers. House listing. No response for 10 minutes. Then, it's not what you think. So I watched, and I quietly prepared because my gut told me something was coming. And in this life, you learn to trust your gut. 3 weeks after receiving the divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall when my phone buzzed. A notification from our banking app. Another withdrawal. $9,200. Almost everything that was left. I dropped my fork and opened the app. The balance in our joint account had dropped to $235.48. Our savings, the $51,000 we had built over years, was gone, completely transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Johnson, one of the guys in my unit, glanced over my shoulder. Bad news? I locked my phone. Nah, just some account stuff. That night, I called our bank from the base phone center. I found out Sarah had been moving the money for weeks. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The big transfers started the day after I deployed. I hung up and stood in the hallway for a long time, watching the guys laughing, calling their kids, their wives, their parents. Normal life happening around me, while mine was falling apart. That's when Miller found me. Alvarez said you looked like you saw a ghost at dinner, he said. What happened? I usually don't share personal stuff, but Miller had pulled me out of a bad situation in Helmand. I trusted her. My wife emptied our accounts and moved her boyfriend into our house, I said. Sent the divorce papers while I was on patrol last week. Miller didn't give me the usual cliches. No, sorry man, no, that sucks. No, you'll find someone better. He just asked, what's your plan? I don't know yet, I replied. He nodded. Let me know if you need anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and logged into the home security system, something Sarah had probably forgotten I could access remotely. The cameras showed a strange truck in our driveway, a man I'd never seen walking our dog, drinking from my coffee mug, wearing my Seahawks hoodie. And there was Sarah, laughing in the kitchen I had remodeled myself during my last leave. Something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, something colder, sharper. I closed the laptop and picked up my phone, made a list. Call David, a fellow soldier turned lawyer. Review the VA loan terms. Contact the sergeant major about emergency leave. Go over the refinancing documents Sarah had casually mentioned last year. Check the security of my military pension accounts. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused, like I was planning a mission. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about strategy. At 5 a.m., before my shift began, I sent an email to David with the subject, "Need legal help? Discreet and urgent." His reply came an hour later. "Call me. Secure line." Only after that call did I know exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't even need to confront her. I just had to wait and observe and let her own actions become the trap. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't tell Sarah I was coming home. I didn't call, didn't message her. I simply checked into a motel downtown Boise under a different name and contacted David. We met at a diner 16 kilometers out of town. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth. "I feel like it too," I replied. David handed me a folder. "It's all here." We went over the house deed, the mortgage paperwork, the bank statements, and then he pulled out a separate document. "I found something interesting while looking into your finances." It was a refinancing application with my signature. Only, it wasn't my signature, not exactly. Someone had tried to replicate it, but got key details wrong. The middle initial was off, the stroke pattern didn't match. "Sarah did this?" I asked, though I already knew. David nodded. 3 months ago, she tapped into the home equity and pulled out $33,000. Your signature was required for it, since the VA loan is solely under your name. So, she forged my signature, took out a loan against our house, drained our accounts, and then served me divorce papers, I said. "Busy woman." "It gets better," David said. "She listed her boyfriend as a co-signer. He has a record, 3 DUIs and a fraud charge back in 2020. I exhaled deeply. "What are my options?" "Plenty," David said. "But first, you need to decide what you want." I thought for a moment. "I want what's legally mine, and I want her to understand consequences." David smiled. "Then here's what we're going to do." The next day I drove past our house. Her boyfriend's truck wasn't there, but Sarah's car was. I parked on a lower street and watched for a while. I thought about knocking, confronting her face to face, but that wasn't the plan. Instead, I drove to the bank, met with the loan officer who had handled the refinancing, showed my military ID, showed the signature on my driver's license, showed the forged documents. His face went pale.